10th, 7 p.m. This is for the Elmore Village committees. First up is the Finance Committee. Are you ready, Councilman Kiefer? Are you muted?
So my apologies, I was muted. You'd think doing 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a day, I'd understand the mute button. First order of business for the Finance Committee is I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to consider investigation of charges and or complaints.
The second, you mean?
I'll second.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Let's hold on one second. So to go into executive session, you want to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters involving public officials, and also to go into executive session with counsel, both outside counsel and village solicitor, to discuss potential or impending litigation.
Yes, and according to 121.22, according to my homework today, what I said was also accurate, but I appreciate the clarification at the last minute, Mark.
Okay, very good.
Do we need to identify who we're going to include and exclude?
Yes. Obviously, executive session will ask all guests to depart, and all online will be put in the room. And Mayor Claire and Council Member Come Now, if you would depart also, and we'll let you know when executive committee is over. Okay. Thanks, sir. Rick, do you hear?
Jim, you can stay. We got to vote first. Till we vote.
Okay, so I made the motion to go to executive session. Jake seconded.
Sherry can call roll. She's here.
Sherry, you want to call the roll?
Okay, yeah, Wardacki,
Yes.
Drill,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Floral,
Yes.
From Now,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes. So, Mr. Jackson, are we good to go now?
We are good to go. Thank you, sir.
Well,
We have to exclude.
you have to excuse.
I understand. Yeah. So if,
Do you have an estimate? Can we get an estimate so where people are half hour? I mean,
I have no way to tell, I'm not really, I see the agenda. I have no idea what the content of the discussion will lead to.
okay, understood. I just,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So in our normal session, we would move to an anteroom, but we don't have an anteroom. So if we could ask you all to depart until. I heard something about refreshments at your discretion.
me to sign off.
You probably just go in the waiting room, Sherry.
Okay, that's, would you do that?
Sherry, I'll call. I'll give you a text.
He'll text you.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, we gotta wait for a bit.
So Kent, we're clearing the room right now, getting
Understood.
everybody dialed off. So we appreciate your patience.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all.
Good.
Is everybody that online in the waiting room, Dave?
Yeah.
We're clear.
Yep, we're clear. Yep, we're clear.
Okay, then once Mr. Hauer gets seated,
Hang on, I gotta pause this.
Just let me
Okay,
know
Sherry, go ahead.
when- Okay. All right, at 8:05. Need somebody to move and second.
Bill made a motion to return from executive session that we did in fact talk about personnel matters regarding a public official. And I second it.
Okay, Kiefer,
I'm muted, sorry, yes.
Wargacki,
Yes.
from now? Oh, sorry, never mind. Drill,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Laurel,
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Kiefer, continue with the finance committee.
Okay, let me pull up the regular finance report here. Give me just a second. Okay, can everybody hear me? Am I off mute? That seems to be an issue tonight. Okay. A review of the finance reports indicate that our overall financial condition remains stable. The cash summary by fund report January through October shows that the $5.27 million ending balance is approximately $379,000 greater than the $4.89 million starting balance. Further, the fund summary for October 2020 indicates that our month-to-date revenue of $345,000 exceeded expenses of $289,000. And our year-to-date revenue of $3.23 million continues to exceed expenses of $2.85 million. Our tax revenue reports indicate that our month-to-date revenue of $72,000 is roughly flat year over year and over 2018. And our year-to-date revenue of $632,000 is flat year over year, but down slightly, 6% over 2018. The good news there is that that 6% deficit over 2018 is less than the 6.9 last month and the 10% the month before that. The total sewer plant, total capital, and total general distributions are generally flat year over year. And as I always say, the year-to-date stability is good news, but we need to continue to closely monitor everything so we ensure we're proactively managing our fiscal responsibilities. We had talked previously about 2021 appropriation planning and 2021 employee pay and merit increase planning. I would remind all the council members and department heads to get your 2021 temporary appropriations into the relevant department heads ASAP so they can start preparing the drafts. And on the merit and pay increase planning, I had a conversation with Dave, Jeff, and a short one with Sherry today. I've got some data to help prepare a distribution for our plan for the distribution of the merit pools, as we talked about before. So I should have that done here in the next couple days, and I'll get it out to everybody. We may have to have a special finance committee meeting to get that specific issue locked down. Shouldn't be a long one, but I want to make sure we're doing it in a detailed manner. That's all I have for finance. Are there any other questions, comments, or additions for finance? Hearing none. At some point, I'm going to get trained on how to use this mute button properly. Sorry about that. Hearing no other concerns, we'll.
Hey, Bill,
Yes.
real quick, and I know this kind of ties in with planning and environment because I think we're going to possibly be talking about that a little bit tonight. We had discussed with Well Park and the issues that have gone on there. I've kind of been doing some research on some playground equipment, and I just wanted to know if there was a direction or maybe a number that we would feel comfortable with to upgrade some of those park issues that we've got, with being mindful to all the other budget items that we've got.
No, I think that's a great question, Zach. And Dave, I think, do you have the line pulled up to see where we're at and where we've been?
Okay.
While Dave's pulling up data, I agree, we need to, that certainly is a perfect item to go into our kind of what should the plan include for next year.
Yeah, I definitely would agree, but I also think that we can't bypass the process and not involve the park board. I think it's extremely important that we keep the people that volunteer for those boards and spend time that we actually engage with them instead of
Correct.
bypassing them.
I completely agree with you, Tom. The only thing that I'm trying to figure out, being a park board member, is what are we going to be able to use funds for? How much are we talking about? Because you've got park equipment that can go all the way up to $70,000. I mean, are you going to put a cap on that, or where's the line going to be? Because obviously we've got to have a line somewhere. So if we can have an idea as to what that line is, then I think we can have a better idea as to maybe some of the things that the park committee could purchase or possibly look at purchasing.
No, and it's a fair question. Dave, do you have some information?
So in the past, capital improvement for parks has been at $2,000. So we would have to look at overall the park budget is only $19,500. That includes all the salaries, benefits, supplies and materials, and contractual services that we have. Parks before was where we pulled our seasonal help out, and I want to continue to do have that conversation. So going forward, we probably would have to look at probably taking something away from somewhere else and putting it into parks if you want to get equipment.
So let me offer this, if I could. I think we've got now a data point for what has been. Zach, can you work with the park board to come back with here's what we think it ought to look like, and that kind of becomes your target or ask or whatever for the 2021 permanent appropriate. I don't think are we going to want to do this in temporary appropriations for, I didn't think so, because temporary appropriations just take us through Q1.
Right.
So I think what we want to do is make this a appropriation item for permanence. And if we now know what has been, and they come back with boy, this is what really would be good and realistic, maybe we make that a discussion and negotiating point for the permanent appropriations when that comes up. Is that fair?
Yeah, I can absolutely print off some different things that I've been seeing and share them with everybody. That's not a problem at all.
And it can
Thank
also
you.
be a capital expense, but it's not something that we've ever thrown more than, I mean, I can remember a year, I think we put $10,000 in there because we knew there was something big they needed, but it's not something we did on an annual basis.
Well, and I think, and that's a good point. So now you've kind of got a little bit of a bracket from history. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what this year has to be, but you got some point of reference. And we lost Zach. I lost Zach anyway.
No, he's fine.
No, he's gone. He's done. He's in the abyss.
So I'm going to assume that concluded Zach's portion of the Finance Committee meeting.
I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
Park apparatus. The Ottawa County Park District just passed a tax levy. It's their first one. And I know that the Park District in Sandusky County used to try to spread their money around, so it created goodwill for passing their future levies. And so they've got money to spend, and it would enhance some of the aspects of the bike trail. I think if you reached out to them, you might get a significant contribution.
Beautiful. No, that's a great point, Mark. Thank you. Anything else for finance? No. Okay. Thank you all. I appreciate it. 8:15.
Thank you.
All right, now we are moving on to planning and environment, economic development. First thing is I want to remind everybody about the calendar deadline.
Yeah, turn your mic on.
Didn't do that.
Thought I did. Okay. I want to remind everybody about the calendar deadline to get dates and pictures. I would like to give the dates to the calendar maker ahead of time if I can. So if anybody has anything they want to add, now's the time to let me know. And then we still are going to go over pictures. At the next council meeting is what we decided. So nobody has anything to add to it. Does anybody want to see the dates and events that I have? Nobody? Okay. Had a conversation with Mark about the strategic plan, and we discussed, if we are coming up with a list of possible properties that could be developed in the area, how we would kind of shelter them, whether or not we want to put them out in the public. So we did come out with an idea to put a disclaimer on it that they may or may not be enforced by the owners, and they're subject to change if they're not available. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my first point is the unmute worked this time, so that's good. No, I think it's good, and the idea here is not to specify properties, but to identify general areas that appear might be attractive for economic development if property owners and others are interested. The idea here is not to become a developer. The idea is not to be a property owner advocate. The idea here is to support the advancement of the economic development strategy by being a connector and catalyst for folks that might be interested in that kind of work. So, and I recreated or updated the kind of action plan that I put out to support the strategic development. It's just an internal working document. And I believe my send got screwed up. Jake, did you see what I resent yesterday or the day before? Okay, so Ben, somehow I must have missed you or didn't go to the right thing. I'll resend that to you. But the idea there is to have our kind of working plan for the committee be reflective of the more current conversations, not to be an advocate for either a property owner or a developer, but to be a conduit to connect folks that might be, or to connect potentially interested parties. So I will make sure that gets out appropriately.
And that is the added stuff we talked about at last committee meetings, correct?
Correct.
We also talked to Mark about possibly doing a resolution. I did send that to everyone. I don't know if they looked at it yet to review, so that we could, let me open it up here. I can read it if you'd like, but that way we don't have to keep coming back to council to change or add to the document, as long as it sticks with the original intent of the document. If everybody would read the resolution, we'd like to pass that, unless anybody has any comments or additions or.
Why don't you give it a read? And we can't pass anything tonight. Would have to be
No.
the next meeting.
So we would put it towards council.
Yeah.
Let's see. The village has a strategic plan approved in the resolution R720, and the village needs to delegate certain secondary functions to implement the strategic plan. The Economic Development Committee is the appropriate authority to perform those tasks. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the Village of Elmore, Ohio, that the Economic Development Committee of the Village of Elmore is hereby delegated the task of implementing the village's strategic plan. Said committee is authorized to gather information, make plans, disseminate information it deems appropriate to carry out the purposes, priorities, objectives, and the key actions found in the village strategic plan. So
I think notably and importantly, it doesn't say we get to make decisions. That is still council's responsibility. We're kind of saying, this is the work party, folks. I want to make sure everybody's cool with that.
no comments, no additions.
I just want to apologize to you guys. I don't know what happened to my work computer there. Sorry about that.
Okay. Hey, Mark, if we can get it ready for next council meeting, then get a number on it so we can vote on it.
Yeah, did Sherry get a copy?
She's not here, no.
Okay.
Not unless you send it to her.
I think I just sent it to you and Bill. I'll send a copy to Sherry and ask her to put a number on it and put it on the agenda for next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is a resolution, so it can be voted on and approved at the next meeting. Does not have to be 3 readings. Perfect.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else on my list. Jake?
I'm good.
Bill?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I do.
Great.
So yesterday we had the discussion with the folks out on Dishinger Road in regards to their sewer proposal, and today.
Wouldn't that fall under Public Works, which is next?
No, you said planning commission yesterday, planning and environment yesterday.
I think that I did. I remember saying that, but don't you think it would fall under Public Works better?
Properties and utilities, isn't that what it's called?
Public Works and Properties. I'm just saying, you know, we can keep it under Planning Commission. I don't know, but I mean,
I don't care. Up to you guys.
I think I misspoke yesterday, so let's put it under Public Works. Everybody okay with that?
Good.
Having said that, do you have anything for P&E?
Nope. Nothing else, Dave? Just that? That's all you had? Okay.
Perfect. Zach, let's move over to Public Works and Properties.
Okay, Dave, I'll let you start if you want.
Sorry about that, Dave.
So yesterday we had a discussion with the folks from Dishinger Road. I have in front of you today a couple of documents pertaining to that. The first one is the drawing, Hogemeyer, this one here. And in there, you will see right here a dot on this one. In this one, it's a little bit bigger that you can see it here. This dot right here, which is in front of the household. And what it shows is that this line here, this dark line, is in fact going outside of the right-of-way and then comes back into the right-of-way as such, all the way down towards Sugar Creek. So in discussion with Hogemeyer today, we are going to reevaluate this line to come out of this manhole at a 45 straight to the right-of-way and then continue on down this way. But in the meantime, what I plan on doing is where we are having the manhole, we already have EPA approval for it. I'm going to be putting a stub onto this with a connector to bring the Huss household into this on December the 8th when they're approved to be in the village, and put a 8-inch clean out with a 6-inch stub onto it so that they can hook their sewer and gravity fed sewer from their house to that at that point. Okay, so that solves that. And then I'm going back to the drawing board on this line itself and re-engineer this to fit into the grand scheme of things heading towards Sugar Creek.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the resolution. That's what I talked to the folks tonight about. so that they didn't stick around till 8:15 just to hear that. Okay, so that's where we are with that piece of that from last night on that sewer. Second thing that was brought to our attention, if you look at this drawing here that talks about the Ames Street, up in the upper right-hand corner, it says Ames Street, Dishinger Road Sewer Extension. Upper left-hand corner, right here. So what I'm showing here is this is where that sewer line would go along that road. And as you're looking at the picture on the left-hand side of this, on the right-hand side along the bike trail, this is the other area that Jeff brought up yesterday on the blue lines area. Blue circle? Yes, the blue circle. Yeah. This is the area that Jeff brought up in regards to the erosion of the bike trail based upon the 24-inch culvert tile that's coming from Grandview right here. Okay, this would be extended basically to where the red lines here depict Jeff's property line. And what we would do is extend that 24-inch culvert past that point and fill in the bike path area next to it with stone and then so on right in this area here, so that it would support and stop the erosion that's going on that he's talking about. Okay, that's the bid that you have in front of you from Matt Tilley. Okay, I haven't done anything with, as you can see, the proposal date on this was back in February. Shortly thereafter, we entered COVID, so that's why nothing was done in the spring. I wanted to wait till the fall, so that at that time when, for example, all the leaves are gone and the brush is dead and no poison ivy and everything, they can get in there and work. So this will be still on the agenda for this year to go forward with this actual work to finish it up. It's just, I'm just waiting for the time to do it, that's all. Just to let you know where we stand with that project on fixing his concerns with the tile in the back of his property. Okay? Well, that's for those two issues.
Are we still okay with enough dirt to fill on top of that? Because in here,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, what I was able to do was I was able to procure the stone from the bridge project, and I would figure on just covering that and then putting the layer of dirt over the top of that. So,
Does that plan sufficiently address the concerns we heard last night?
yes,
Okay, and this is all good to go from a budget standpoint, inside our general appropriations and all that? Okay, great, thank you.
yeah. One last thing that has come up over the past couple of days that I want you guys to be aware of is this next picture that I have is the Dishinger Farm drainage issues. Okay. Residents built a house. Oh, well, let me go back even further. An individual purchased the final 2 lots back in Sugar Creek, which is the house here and the pond. Okay. So he was able to procure this whole area, and he started building his house back in May timeframe, worked through the summer. I think it's pretty well done now. But during that time frame, he actually went and he drained the pond out there, and so doing so, cleaned out the bottom of that pond so that he could use it for recreational swimming. And at the same time, he took the bottom part of it, built it up around the pond, and in so doing so, crushed the tiles that feed from Dishinger Farm into that pond, and has not repaired it. So I've talked to him off and on it. I think the resolution to him is something a little bit different than what I'm seeking resolution on. But my point being is that right now there is no removal of the water off of the field, because that was the main feeder off of that to that pond. And then eventually the pond would overflow, go down the backside into Sugar Creek this way, as the arrow shows. So yes, and that's exactly right. To what Bill's saying is that a couple of the residents along here got the blunt of that during several heavy rains, at some time or another. So yesterday I was with Ron Leidy, county engineer, discussing this problem, because when I originally talked with the owner, he stated that the county engineer and the soil and conservation folks told him that he could plug those tiles if he wanted to. Well, in discussion with Ron, he basically says, I need a name. And the resident hasn't given up any names yet. And so he gave me some options. There's 3 options that we can do with this. One is force him to reopen these tiles, okay, and put that back into the pond. But I believe at this point, it would probably involve engaging Mark with litigation to do that, okay? I don't think he's willing to do that any longer. The second thing would be to retile some of this area and put it and basically make an area to go down that side where it was already next to the bike trail where the blue arrow is showing. The other is to engage soil and conservation and the county engineer to do a topographical type area to make sure that if we wanted to, we could actually have it come going back towards the east and down this way that the yellow arrow is pointing to on the drawing to support the drainage off of that way down next to the golf course and going towards Sugar Creek this way along Golf Course Road. The problem with this route is that we're actually going to be trying to push water uphill, Ron believes, because of the natural flow on the topographical. He's not sure, but he believes that it's like this at that point. Yeah, a crown. And so there would be a little bit more work involved with that. The other thing to do is to engage Jerry and try to work with him because he would also benefit from us moving that tile around this way, to have him support us with some funding from him and ourselves to move the tile around this way instead of trying to engage him to rehook this tile up at this time. He's not going to listen to that right now. He wants to keep this for recreational use and not have herbicides and other things go into that pond anymore. So I just want to give you, if you start hearing things, this is what I'm trying to engage him in and trying to do. Ultimately, I just want to get this corrected, whatever it takes. So any thoughts on this at all?
Is there a buried pipe anywhere along the old railroad there? Like a storm drain? Nothing?
No, not that we can find. And I asked Buck because at one time he provided some relief along here. And what he was telling me was that he actually brought in dirt and had dirt going through here to support the watershed going into the drainage ditch along the side there.
Is there enough room? Is there enough room in the right of way of the bike path to run a pipe like most of the way to the creek when the ground kind of drops off? Do we own that much right of way or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But again, what we would do is if we did an easement along there, we would better the others so they would be involved also in the cost of this. If that were to go along that whole route with a tile.
I think it's probably too early to come to a conclusion.
Right. I'm still.
I think there's a lot of moving parts here. I would just suggest that whatever we do, we don't want to create a great solution that causes other harm.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know what that would be. The potential for doing nothing doesn't sound like a good potential. The potential ups and downs for running that relief along the bike path behind the Sugarview homes, I think there's probably more homework to do there. And even if you can go uphill on the third option, it would be more difficult. That water's going to do something over there, and will that do anything to the golf course property? Are we moving water from one problem to another problem? So probably a lot of questions that just kind of need to be dealt with. Do we have a seasonal and timing issue we got to be ready for? Because my thought is if those are plugged, spring rains come, all of a sudden something's going to be a problem.
And that's what we're kind of working against, is that whole point is that right now, I've been talking with Gary, he's able to get his crops off without any problems, but his next planting season is where his concern lies now, if he's able to get in there and when. And it's been a dry season, so we really don't know how much of an effect this has so far overall, but eventually it's going to affect it somehow. So, you know,
That's a good overview.
I think it's 50-foot right away on the bike path.
is that what it
I
is?
think it's 50 down that way.
Okay. That's all I got for Public Works though, right now.
I've got a couple of observations on that drainage issue, David. I don't think there's any question that we have an easement, either there must either be a formal easement or a prescriptive easement of our right to drain that farm into that pond. And it's a question of, I suppose, litigation and whether or not the original fix of the problem, draining into the pond, is the most ideal. If that's the ideal situation, and you've got some alternatives that are equally attractive, we can look at the cost of those versus the cost of litigation. We can work something up to see which way you ought to go. I'm also concerned that if we change from the way it had been, that we're going to get blamed for other people being flooded out. And I know there were some problems. You described problems to me back there from years past. And we seem to be at a stable relationship with Sugarview back there at this time. But if you change it at all, that stability is going to be upset, I think. And that may be an issue. I wondered if Ron, the county engineer's office, would take this on for a ditch maintenance program for drainage and assessment of the benefited properties. I don't know if you had an opportunity to talk to him about that, but that is a long-term solution. It's not going to be a short-term fix. And the other solution that came to mind was if we can't use his pond, is it cost effective to put a pond on Dishinger Farm and use that as a retention pond and drain into there? And then we're not part of the problem, not part of anyone's problem anymore. So those are just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark, because that was, to your point, Ron brought up that, there are drainage laws that do allow us to force him at that point to put those back in. Because I've got the deeds, and the deeds don't state specifically that we have an easement into that pond. It was always just there for as far back as we can see. So yeah, since it's been in there for greater than 20 years, those laws are in effect at this time. So, and that was one of the things, but at that point, it becomes a contentious relationship, and is that where we want to go with the litigation and stuff, right? So that was it. But again, there's another opportunity. Do we put a pond there? That hasn't even been thought of yet, and just as a retaining for it. So
Would that affect the agreement we have for the farmer, because he'll then be losing acreage?
Right, we have to renegotiate that with him too.
But if you put in the drainage pond, he may, by having that drainage, he may regain tillable acreage.
And does that contract go out yearly? I can't remember.
It's a 5-year.
5-year. Oh, okay, 5-year. And this is what year? What year is this of that?
2? You weren't on council when we approved it, right? Yeah. So this is year 2, I think. We're at the end of the second year.
Oh.
I have nothing else.
Yeah. Dave, I noticed in your report, which I always appreciate because it is detailed and it is helpful. Monitoring water and sewer samples, how are we looking in that area? All water still looking good quality wise and sewer
Yes, we have no
samples?
problems. Yeah, we have
Perfect.
no, we have not had any exceedance or any type of EPA traffic tickets, I'll call it, since we had one this year when our hardness went high. But other than that, we're good.
Perfect.
Green findings, that's what it is.
With, now that I just thought of that, with certificates, are those updated yearly? Like EPA certificates with wastewater?
2 years.
Okay, and I think, is our wastewater guy on year one of his?
Yeah, yeah, this is his off year.
Okay, all right, good, good. Utility pole plate replacements?
We have one that we have to do at the corner of Golf Course and South Portage River right now. That's the only one that's out there remaining. And I'm glad you brought this up. The 4 kV, 12 kV is back on, is on hold right now because we're waiting for a part that normally we don't have to wait for. It's called a stirrup. And if you can imagine a U-bolt clamp as such, that clamps onto the wires. And from there, we clamp onto it to hold the high tension wires to the transformer. We can't get these clamps. There's none to be found anywhere. There's only 2 manufacturers, and right now they're both out of them. And the dates that they've given us is about the middle of January. And I've got others trying to find them for us, but we did find a supplier that could get us to about the 18th of December. So,
Is that shortage because of COVID?
no,
Okay.
hurricanes.
Gotcha.
Dave, you said for that utility pole, it was the corner of the golf course and was it Elmore East?
No, South Portage River Road,
Oh, okay.
right across the street from the Beans residence.
Okay. With the bridge project, I know that in the report it said it was completed. Did they give you guys any detail or time frame as to when the lights would be done?
So, which lights aren't working or are working?
The lights that look like they're downtown.
Are not working or are working?
They are not.
Yeah,
At least I mean, yeah, I'm looking at it right now and I don't see them on.
yeah, no, they have not, but basically there's just punch list stuff. So it's not like it's a major, that's why I took it off the list. It's just not major
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had talked to Dave about that, and they're actually going to replace those 4 lights that shine right down to the street with the ornamental lights.
Perfect. Sludge removal from wastewater plant, was that, is that still in the process of taking care of that, or are we kind of caught up with that right now?
We're caught up with it. We removed the actual sludge out of the tank, the holding tank, 2 weeks ago. Ron's hauling took it away, and Bill is in the process right now of taking sludge out of the tank and putting it back into the stainless tank that we have. So that was it cost us $850 to remove the sludge, and normally it would cost us $19,000. So we're going to see some cost savings there. We'll probably have to do 4 or 5 sludge removals, but even then, we're only talking $3,000 to $4,000 as compared to $19,000.
Is that going to be made permanent in the location? Are we still talking about that? Or?
I have the dewatering slab approved through the EPA, and we keep trying to work our way around it as an in-house project. I'm trying to keep it outside of, but I just can't break the guys free from leaves right now. That's the whole point. Leaves are such a manpower-intensive task. It's unbelievable.
Any update with Amplex?
On schedule for a January, early February turnover to the customers is what I've been told. Right now, got the central business district on fiber, and people are allowed to switch over to it in the central business district if you want to. And then they're, like I say, they're doing the underground out near you guys out at Eagle View, and they're moving out to Orchard that way, and then they'll be up going over to subdivision out on out farther where Dewey lived and all that, out farther that way. So
And you said January, February is when they were thinking?
yeah.
Okay.
It keeps slipping just because they can't get the manpower to get in the underground. I mean, they're hiring people left and right. They had a guy in today getting fingerprinted with Jeff, and he's head of the project. And I mean, it's almost like a weekly thing. They got somebody coming in from Amplex doing background checks.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah.
Last thing I had was, did you come across any more trees that you guys thought about removing? For the
Yeah.
rest?
So that one, I don't know if I saw the pictures or have been by that tree over on Augusta. That's the one that you were talking about, Zach. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's, I don't know how it was still standing. There was a hole 2 foot down and all the way around. There was probably about that much wood on the outside of it all the way around that was left. I don't know. We got one over on Huron Street that we just took down, and there's one that was identified on Toledo Street, but it doesn't seem to be as bad. Jim and I have talked about it. We were going to go over and take a look at it this week. We'll get there. We'll get there sooner than later. It's just when I can find the time. It's not him, it's me. When I can break away. But yeah, Jim's been identifying them. So is Glenn Humbert, a couple others, and we've been poking at them, and yeah, we're bringing them down because I don't want another tree to come down on a vehicle.
Hey, along the tree line, if I could just jump in here, the Fremont and Toledo Street corner.
Yeah.
I know the homeowner took out the bushes, but whoever took the trees down, that has opened that up so much better.
Yes.
It's way easier to see what's going on there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Dave, real quick, did you say the one on Augusta, did you take that one down or that's in the process?
No, it was down. It's down.
Okay, it's down.
Right in front of Allie's sister.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Ben, Tom, did you guys have anything?
I did not.
Zach, I had something for you.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
All right, today, Mark Wax, who's a board member from Bethel Church, called and said he had received a request from Christie's Corner to place a dumpster at the parking lot behind Christie's Corner and the Village Inn and everything. And we do have that leased. And he wanted me to bring it out. Christie's Corner is going to lose their dumpster spot because the building in between Whimsy and Blue and Christie's Corner has been sold. And he wanted to know if it would be okay to for council to allow them to put a dumpster back there. It would be back in the very far, like the south, east, west corner, back by the old Dydermeyer building. It would probably be another small one. He's going to find out for sure, but he wanted me to bring it up to you guys. So.
Mark, did we want to talk about the zoning?
Yeah, whenever you're ready. Is this the committee for it, Dave?
Would this be the right committee for zoning? Can we?
Properties. I think you're good. Can I ask one question, Dave, first?
Sure. Yeah.
Did we get the funding for the water tower project?
So it's been, it was turned down today at the district meeting. So now we're going to small government meeting down in Columbus. And it has been approved through the loan already, but not through OPWC. So that's where we're headed next, is to small government. That funding is May, is when that is released, yes. Yep.
Just to make sure I've got it clear for the notes, you said the funding was turned down for
OPWC money at the
OP.
district level. Yep.
Thank you.
I'll send you this email from user Zach.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Ready for me?
Yes,
Yep.
go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Dave has had some issues brought to his attention. He brought them to my attention. The zoning resolution seems to be somewhat out of date. It hasn't kept up with modern society. So for instance, it's unclear at this point whether Airbnbs are appropriate in the downtown area. And that should either be fixed or an interpretation made that would render those either in violation or allowed. In addition to that, there's a request for, I believe, for a distillery downtown. And that is not a permitted use. I don't think it's a permitted use in any of our zoning classifications. There is an apartment in the old Elmore lumber building on the first floor. And in that district, apartments have to be on the second floor of commercial buildings. So those are some of the problems. Dave and I discussed some fixes. So for instance, defining an Airbnb and allowing Airbnbs in the central business district or general business district. And possibly in the neighborhood business district as well. To allow dwelling units on the first floor of properties, even in those business districts, except for Rice Street. So Rice Street would be limited to dwelling units on the second floor. Outside of Rice Street, you could have them on the first floor, for instance, like at the old Elmore lumber building. And then I talked to the person that's interested in putting a distillery downtown, and they're not interested in a Jack Daniel's kind of place. They're interested in a little boutique kind of place where they, I don't know if any of you remember the distillery in Oak Harbor that Mayor Hilly used to have. That's the impression I get of what he would like to do in Elmore, which I think is kind of neat. But at the same time, we allow, if you are going to allow a distillery or consider allowing a distillery, you might also want to consider brew pubs, vintners for selling wine, things like that. So there are a couple ways to go with it. Both ways involve changing the zoning ordinance. One way would be to change the zoning ordinance to make those things permitted uses. Define them in a way that's acceptable to council and to the planning commission, and then consider them for passage. Another way to go about it is to make those uses conditional uses, so that you could grant a conditional use for these things, and you'd have more control over it then as a conditional use. The downside of making a conditional use is that once we go through the zoning change to make it a conditional use, then the property owners, if they're wanting to move right now, they would then have to go the next step of applying for a conditional use. So you're probably looking at 6 months worth of work before something could come to fruition if it's a conditional use as opposed to a zoning amendment. Zoning amendments are initiated by planning commission, council, or by the property owner. So I think this one is anticipated that it would be initiated by council. And that's under 1107.14 of the zoning ordinance. And then under 1107.15, it defines the contents of the application to initiate a zoning amendment. Once, assuming that council is the one that initiates the request for the zoning amendment, that is transmitted to the planning commission. The planning commission must then wait at least 20 days before they have a hearing. And the planning commission must publish notice of that hearing once, at least 15 days prior to the hearing. So if you were to initiate a zoning change, a zoning amendment, you're not going to get a hearing in the planning commission before 20 days. Once the planning commission has their hearing, they have 15 days to make a recommendation. They could, of course, make a recommendation that night if they wanted to, but they have up to 15 days. And then their recommendation goes to council. Council cannot hear the zoning change, cannot consider it until 40 days have expired. And you also must give notice once in a newspaper at least 30 days before that hearing. So you've got a 20-day hearing and a 30-day hearing. I'm sorry, a 20-day hearing and a 40-day hearing. And I'm thinking that if you wanted to move this quickly, you could probably make some of that 40 days. No, you could not. I'm sorry. You could not. You could not make carve some of that 40 days into the 20 days with the planning commission. It's not possible. However, you could publish before you get the recommendation from the planning commission. Council has to act within 30 days of the hearing. So there's a 20-day hearing, planning commission, 40-day hearing with council, and then council must act within 30 days. Once council acts, your zoning changes are effective 30 days after the hearing, unless there is a referendum signed by 10% of the voters asking that the change be put on the ballot. So if you go for a zoning change to make these permitted uses, the property owners would then, if the zoning change is effective, would be able to move immediately. If you made them zoning changes by making them conditional uses, then once this whole process I've described started or finished, then the application for conditional use would start. So if you're interested in making those changes, I could probably work with a council member or two, make some suggested changes to our ordinances, probably check out some ordinances in other jurisdictions relating to brew pubs, distilleries, and so forth to make sure that what works in other places is something that we consider for Elmore. You may want to consider, say, a distillery not to exceed so many square foot of floor space so that you don't get a factory downtown manufacturing 100,000 or 200,000 gallons of liquor a year, whatever. But all of those things can be worked into the zoning. That together with the Airbnb clarifications and the first floor residence. Were there other things, Dave, that we had discussed? Have I missed anything?
Nope, you've got them.
So I have a question. I understand the first floor residence and the Airbnb, but through conversations with the Dora, it was my understanding that in this area, there were no more alcohol licenses available. Am I incorrect?
I can address that.
Okay.
So the individual.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. So the individual is already a downtown businessman here. He's bringing his license from Fremont to here. He's bringing his license from Fremont to here. So it's an A3A. It's limited to 10,000 gallons a year to distill. And he wants to open up something downtown in the area and be a part of the revitalization of the downtown area. I can't hear you.
We can licenses can move from county to county like that?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, I don't know. So
What,
Yeah, I had a conversation with him today about it.
I had a conversation with him on, I think it was Friday or Saturday, and he didn't seem to think the license would be a problem. He gave me the number of 10,000 gallons as well, but I looked up the A3A and it's actually 100,000 gallons. So that's where we may want to clarification and exactly, give him a comfortable room to work what he needs without opening up all the zoning for a massive distillery manufacturing operation.
Right now, our distillery operations are set for heavy industry. And with the advent of 21st century, where people are having these licenses that for smaller areas, it's time just to support some of those and make it a little bit easier.
Can we add?
As well as internet-based commerce, because there are some people down here that are working and have open storefronts that are not really open to general business, but are booming on the internet, So.
Maybe we leave the large distilleries in and have a separate for like a micro. And
exactly.
And before we go through with it, maybe you should just run it by Doug and ask him how that will affect the sanitary treatment at the plant, just in case anything that the distillery process gives off will do anything to our system.
That's a good idea. I didn't think about that. Yep, I can take that action.
So can I ask a couple questions or maybe offer a couple thoughts? Am I off mute?
Yeah, you're fine.
It worked. It seems to me we've got topics of a broad general nature regarding zoning. I think, Mark, one of your early comments was that we've got to make sure our resolutions are up to date and reflective of current realities that maybe didn't exist. And then we have a second bucket of activity that's maybe more time sensitive based on particular interest, the distillery kind of issue. Do we need to attack this two ways? One is figure out a course of action relative to the distillery request, and two, deal with a more wholesale look at our zoning. That's kind of how I think we might have a great way forward. Does that make sense, or am I hearing this wrong?
And Dave and I talked about that actually, and we thought the immediate need was to patch the zoning so that the way the town has grown and wants to grow in an attractive way, in your opinion, that be encouraged. And then we also talked about whether there should be a wholesale overhaul of zoning. And we decided that perhaps asking that we patch our current zoning resolution would be the way to go for the time being. If council wanted to update the entire zoning code, we could of course do that. We'd probably enlist the help of Mark Mesa at the Planning Commission, get some model zoning codes, and it would probably be a task somewhat larger than the employee handbook.
Okay. So if I heard that right, the potential plan is roughly akin to fixing the train while it's rolling down the track, and we're going to rebuild the network that the trains run on.
Yeah. Yeah,
Relative to the issue of zoning, I support all of that. I think it's important. I think we got to do the right things, to help encourage and enable growth. But we also have to make sure that our entire basis of ordinances and rules are accurate and reflective, and that they enable appropriate execution of duties related to those rules.
Has this person already purchased property? So we're under the,
He's in the process.
okay.
I think it's a lease. I think he wants to sign a lease.
Right.
So,
I say we do whatever's necessary to at least get this one issue resolved first, and then we move on to the others.
I can
Go
can
ahead, Mark.
prepare a draft and share it with all of you, and then we could tweak it at as it needs to be done. But I'm thinking that probably Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd like these proposals available for next council meeting for council to initiate a zoning ordinance change and send it to the planning commission at the next council meeting. Is that a fair statement?
That is exactly right.
So the question that I have is the timetable for, like you mentioned, the Airbnb and the first floor, no first floor residency. Is it the same as what we're looking for for the zoning for the distillery?
Yeah, I'd probably do it all all at once.
Okay.
So you avoid duplication of meetings and so forth.
Okay.
do we run a risk of answering current challenges and then somehow putting ourselves in a box for bigger, longer-term solutions? I don't want to solve the distillery, Airbnb, first floor, and internet-based business stuff and then find out that we just created a problem for realistic zoning review and overhaul. I don't know that that's a realistic possibility, but I don't want to solve 3 or 4 small things and then create an obstacle for a bigger picture change.
The only thing I would think about that is they're addressing current needs because those things are already there.
Sure. I guess what I'm saying.
Otherwise, they're in violation.
Yeah, my only thought is we're dealing with current needs, which certainly we got to do. We got to do stuff timely. I don't want to fix today and wind up creating more problems unintentionally. If we fix this, but create problems for that, I don't want to rush into this. I don't want to hold up progress. I don't want to harm any potential value add to the village, but I also don't want to make that puppy dog mistake where we rush into these solutions and go, oops, we screwed that up over there. So Mark, I think what I heard from you early on was a lot of possibilities. Is there any way that beyond just saying, hey, here's the resolution or proposed resolution to go forward, could you say, hey, look, here's the issues that are being presented that are relatively time sensitive. Here's the 3 or 4 ways we could go forward and the ramifications of those. And here's what we recommend to address the current needs. And here's what that might do to place us better for a future wholesale review. Could you do something like that without racking up a gazillion billable hours?
I'm a little bit uncertain about your proposal. See if I'm stating it correctly. The tweaks that we do here, you don't want to interfere with the potential for a zoning rewrite.
Basically, yeah. So here's basically what I'm saying. What can we do for all the different issues? What do you recommend we do? And what's the good, the bad, and the ugly in the long term, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually if we engage regional planning, Mark Mesa, and say, hey, this is what we want to do, he's probably has already stuff that's already written up that wouldn't take a gazillion of Mark's time to rewrite, that we could easily incorporate into the next section.
Yeah.
So let me help you a little bit. What we're looking at is two areas right now: central business district and general business district. To start with this. So I think to your point, are we going to start doing something damage to others, or are we going to make ourselves vulnerable in other areas? I think if we take the bite out of the elephant at the prime rib at this point, which I think is that area, I think it will help us through the other areas.
I agree.
That's the point where I think we need to start at, and that's where I think Mark and I are talking about. It's just that small area right now, and not taking it the whole thing at once, though. So I think we just take it small bites. We can probably ward ourselves off from what your concerns are, but there's always that potential.
The worst case scenario is you get something wrong, and then you change it to what you want, to a better situation, and then what happens is those businesses that took advantage of that are grandfathered, but they can't expand, and beyond, I think it's 20%. So they're a non-conforming use that eventually time will take care of that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not just going fast. I just want to make sure we're really thinking through the possibilities, the requirements, the pros, the cons, the must-dos, the might-be goods before we get to, hey, we got to sign this thing. That's all I'm really asking.
And that is why you've got the hearing at the planning committee. You've got two boards deciding it, the planning commission and the council, and you've got your timeframes to observe in there.
That's all fair. Yeah, good. And I'm glad you all brought it up tonight. I think it's important we keep that discussion going.
So in order to I don't think to initiate this we'll need an ordinance, which means that we don't have to pass an emergency measure or do 3 readings. So I think a resolution to initiate a request to the planning commission would be sufficient. So I'll probably prepare it along those lines unless my research indicates that I have to do different.
I got a question. I know we haven't had a planning commission meeting in a while. Is that staffed? Do we have appointees that are in place?
Dave and I talked about that today as well. Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, there are members already. Rick has the list. It does consist of Tom that's on it, along with Nate Overmeyer and a few others. Rick, you want to read those names?
Rick, you're muted.
Muted.
Bob Babjack, Nathan Overmeyer, Kent Makulinski, Tom Jackson, and myself. There's 5 members.
So once
Mark,
I get the resolution through, we will document that with the 15-day clock and have the planning commission meet at that point then.
Was that comment directed to me? I didn't understand. I couldn't hear you clearly, Dave.
I was just telling the timetable, that's all.
Okay.
It wasn't meant for you directly.
Okay,
No. It
good.
was just a timetable.
Mark, real quick.
Just for my own edification, actually.
Real quick, Mark, for the minutes, you said your plan of action was to do what?
Have a resolution for council at their next regular meeting to consider.
Thank you.
And then that would be a resolution to refer the matter to initiate proposed zoning change to the planning commission.
Thank you very much.
Did you get all that, Zach?
I hope so.
I guess the word zoning change should be zoning changes.
Thank you. Anything else for public utilities and properties?
Thanks, Zach.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Mr. Crumnow, Councilman Crumnow, security.
Okay, Jeff, you with us? Chief?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I don't have a lot, but we have been taking apart the old police car, and I went ahead and made a donation to the village of Clay Center and their police force for our unused equipment that we would never have any use for. So I transferred a lot of equipment to them today, and I do intend on listing that old vehicle for sale on Gov Deals. The only other thing I have is I did want to have some discussion about wages and specifically about part-time wages. We don't have to decide anything tonight, but I did an informal study that I emailed out, and I just kind of wanted to start talking about that topic, and I'd like to see us become a little bit more competitive with starting wages for part-time police. We put a lot of responsibilities on those individuals, and I think they're undercompensated. And based upon my informal studies, we are the lowest starting wage I was able to find. So I did want to bring that up for some discussion. That's all I have.
If I could add here, I think it's a good time of year to talk about it because we're doing budget planning for next year. It's also a bit of a challenging time to talk about it because we've got merit pay coming up. So we're going to be very mindful of what it is we're attempting to do. Because if you're going to shift starting rates, we got to think about what does that do to current employees that are new, and if we're going to increase the base start, the base range, what does that do all the way up, and how are we going to deal with that? Because oftentimes it's human nature to hear that somebody got a pay raise, and the next question is, why not me? So when you change ranges at the same time that you do merit work, nothing says you can't. But you better be darn clear about what you're doing, how and why. So I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Yeah, and like I said, this has been something that's been on my mind for a while, and I'd like to just at least bring it to the forefront and kind of let it be known that I don't feel the Elmore Police Department is I don't feel that the starting wages for the part-time is sufficient for what they're doing, and it doesn't appear to be sufficient for the market. So that's just something that we need to, if it takes in using the merit pay to make that work, that's okay too. I'm not opposed to how we get there.
That's mixing apples and oranges. That's exactly my point. So what I would suggest is that we have a special finance meeting sometime soon, and we'll talk about merit pay ranges.
Okay.
And get all the discussion tied together so we can make sure we're clear about what we're trying to achieve and what we're going to do and how.
What was it your intention to do that anyway?
Pretty much.
Okay. That's
Well,
fine then.
Well, and I want to be clear. When we had our salary planning last year, and when we touched on it in our last committee meetings, if I recall correctly, council was to define the buckets that go to each department and not necessarily the individual merit pay increases. Department heads and the mayor, I think, have to have that discussion. I don't know that that's what council's job is. Our job is to make sure you don't bust the budget. Having a change in wage base and range shifts the equation. So we got to decide which is a market equity increase and which is a merit increase. And if anybody is impacted by either or both. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but it can get, you got to be thorough with this stuff.
And I realize that, and I bring this forward for this type of discussion.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Jeff, I have a question for you. How many hours a year does a part-time officer work?
Very minimal, and I've had some work closer to full-time, so it's really hard to say.
Did you
So,
say a minimum, say average of 1,000, 1,200 on average?
I would say less. I would say I'm gonna say 800, just to throw a figure out.
so every $1 an hour you give them is going to cost the village $800.
Yeah.
Okay. Put it in perspective.
And really it is very cost effective for us to have these folks where we're not paying the benefits, we're not paying the high pension rates, things like that.
And you're avoiding some overtime too, I assume.
And we're using them in place of overtime.
And it builds a feeder pool of potential future first timers.
Yeah, that's been the successful way to go to start out in that capacity and work your way up. And that's how I started years ago. So at some point, I'd like to see that. And in my mind, I'd like to see a minimum $15 an hour for a police officer for the village of Elmore. But like I said, this is all for discussion.
And that's good. And I think Mark's got a good point. In raw dollar terms, impact may be de minimis. But in terms of internal and external equity and perception and satisfaction between our employees, we have to look at all that.
Yes. I appreciate you realizing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Kiefer, you had mentioned holding a special finance committee meeting, but also understanding that during the finance committee meeting, you had mentioned you're still working with Dave on some budgetary items.
Mm-hmm.
So when would you envision having the special finance committee meeting?
Well, sometime next week is what I'd like to do, but I'd like to hold off scheduling that until I talk to Mr. Hauer about some of the information. I don't want to commit to a meeting and I know I'm not going to have the information ready.
Yes, please note that I will be out of town 16th through the 19th of next week.
Change your plans.
Trust me, I don't want to drive to Mississippi.
You can Zoom from anywhere, Tom.
That's true.
I'm only available the 19th and 20th.
All right. Well, it may have to be the week after, but I'll work with Dave tonight to figure out when we can have some preliminary discussions, and I'll shoot out some possibilities for a special finance committee meeting.
Perfect.
May I ask Jeff a question?
Yes, sir.
Do you know when the last time it was that we raised the starting salary or the starting hourly rate for a starting police officer? That's a good enough answer.
No, I mean, it's been that for a long time.
That tells you something.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so here's where I'm really going to be concerned and where the meeting I think is going to go to. If we're going to do a salary range review for the police, we better be thinking about what we're doing for the rest of the groups too, just to revalidate it, to age the data. Okay, so.
That's fair to do regardless every once in a while.
Yeah, and I think we need to do that. But I appreciate you starting the discussion.
Thank you. That's all I had for security, unless anybody else or Jim has anything.
Jake, you got anything?
No, I don't.
I just got one little thing, Jeff.
Sure.
We discussed about the disposal of junk vehicles, and I have the ordinance in front of me here. And maybe we ought to, all of us ought to look at them and discuss them. Maybe we could tighten them up a little bit. Maybe it could help you out.
In the past, that I did have a recommendation that we raise the value. Is it $800? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's 800 here.
That we raise the value to maybe 1,000 or 1,200 because scrap values were up. That was kind of something that I looked at in the past, but that's certainly something the council could look at.
Yeah, because I always thought if we use to make sure they have their valid sticker, that's kind of like it makes them think they have to buy one every year. So it's like, it's not a fine, but it gets their attention.
And that does, right now, there's a little bit with that because with COVID, they're allowing you to be expired till 90 days after the order expires. So, but as far as tightening up, that's kind of an easy way that I thought maybe we could push that value up a little bit.
Yeah, and then the other problem is when somebody tells you it runs, and maybe we ought to just make sure we see it run instead of taking a word for it,
Generally, if it's in that bad a shape, I can find enough violations.
Okay.
I mean, I did send out 6 notices, and I'm pretty happy with everybody's compliance. We didn't have to take anybody to court. Everybody complied, and we'll continue to monitor things.
Okay.
Jeff and Jim, this is Mark.
Go ahead.
So a lot of those are covered. A lot of those things are covered in the revised code. So we have to be careful about coordinating between the ordinance and the revised code. I know the revised code says that the vehicle has to be apparently inoperable. And I don't know what our ordinance says. I haven't looked at it lately. But if apparently inoperable is different than does it run. So we might be able to tweak it like that, Jim.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. Time 9:29.
9:29. Okay, so at 9:29, we are in personnel. And the only things that I want to report is yesterday we approved 2 ordinances, 08-20 and 09-20. And it's actually going to generate a reprint of the employee handbook for all employees. So that's the only thing that I have to report on personnel. Does anybody have anything else?
So I do.
Okay.
So we had 61 individuals apply. Yep, we had 61 individuals apply. I started working through the, I started working through the resumes today and working through that. As soon as I get a clear list, I will forward that to the committee and have you look through it and start setting up for interviews. So we should be doing interviews probably the week of or the week after Thanksgiving, probably. That's my timetable right now.
And just to be clear, those 61 applications are for what?
Service 1, 2, or 3 position, 3 being the highest qualified individual.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd like to go after 2 of those.
How many are,
How many FTEs do you normally have in the department that you have been approved?
I have one available, and I want to take the seasonal and make it an FTE. I have enough work and documentation to show that work for an FTE.
So that's probably something that we should also discuss at the finance committee meeting as well.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think we can talk about that. I'd like to look back just briefly. We don't have to do it. I don't want to make this hard. Don't stop doing what you're doing. At the personnel handbook, see if there's any particular procedural requirements for adding a head count. So basically, you're not adding, you're converting. You're converting a seasonal to a full-time. You know, I have to put some level of faith in our department heads. If you tell me the work's there and you need it and we can afford it, and we'll take a look at the budget, I got to give you the tools to do the job. Because you can darn sure bet at some point when we don't have the money, we're going to tell you how many you have to cut. So I don't want you to be hamstrung unnecessarily by manpower issues if we got the money to do it.
I definitely would agree, but I just want to make sure that's part of our budget.
No, absolutely. And as we look at 2021 budget planning and we look at merit pay stuff, part of that discussion is how many headcount are you planning for the year and all that. So some of you may remember last year, the ungodly complex Excel spreadsheet I put together. I don't intend to do that again.
Perfect. Does anybody else have anything for personnel? Zach? You were muted, but I said that I saw your head shake, so.
No, I do not.
Okay. Jim? Perfect. Now we are on to streets. Mr. Councilman Wargacki.
All right, the only thing I had for streets, Ben had put together a nice map of sidewalks. We had discussed that during our last committee meeting. So it's just a good starting point when I know there's a sidewalk committee we're going to be meeting. We haven't started with it yet, but it would be a nice tool that will be able to print out and allow us to map out potential areas for repair, areas for replacement, and then identify whether someone doesn't have a sidewalk and doesn't have to put one in, or if they don't have one and have to. So other than that, I have nothing else. I don't know if Dave had anything to add, or Jim, Zach, but I've got nothing else.
No, I'm fine.
So just a little bit on that. Now I'm going around the village properties, documenting sidewalk conditions and
Okay.
stuff. And, so that when we're starting to walk down that road, we can get it in the budget and understand where we are overall for 21.
Okay.
Perfect. And I just want to let everybody know that I've just entered battery save mode on my laptop. So.
Yeah, I actually lost mine about half hour ago, so I'm on my phone.
The only thing I have real quick is, and I guess it's more for Dave. Dave, did you ever look into the steps there along the
I did.
Harrington Cemetery? Oh, you
Did.
okay?
And that is township property.
Oh, it's township.
Yeah, we don't own that.
Okay. Thank you for looking into it. I appreciate
That's a
it.
problem. Yep, not a problem.
Anything else for streets?
Not at this time.
All right, perfect. So let's open it up to guests online. User Shadowman. Elmore. And we have two members in the audience today. Mrs. Shope? Anything?
Is there any way she can?
Can you do me a favor? The people online can't hear you. Oh, yeah, there's people online.
While we're waiting, Jim Crum now, I have some information for you. If you look at revised code section 4513.63, that gives
First of all, I want to
gives-
know, who was the attorney hired by you and Dave Howard? And did you hire him for the council or did you hire him for Rick?
Yeah, you're more than welcome to.
Okay. So the individual's name is Ken Murphy of Murphy Lewandowski. His rate is $150 an hour, and he was hired through council for council.
Kent Murphy?
Murphy, M-U-R-R-E-E.
Did that answer your question? Did you have any more?
What he has said his name and whether it was hired, he was hired for council.
Mr. Howard just did that.
Council was supposed to have their attorney. Rick was supposed to have his attorney.
I just answered
We
you.
just answered the question.
And
I just
Kent
told you the
Murphy
answer.
was hired to conduct an investigation on behalf of council. He's not hired for anybody except council.
council
For
only.
council, yes.
Okay, for council. What are his credentials?
His credentials are that he is versed in.
We're wondering. Write his name down.
Sure. He is versed in human resources and litigation with.
Yes, and I believe he indicated he has over 25 years of experience in those fields.
Yes.
I would caution council about answering any more questions because we're
So he's-
delving into things that happened in executive session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Human resources and he's through the county?
Yeah. Well, he's actually, there's an open investigation, so there's a lot of stuff that we cannot comment on because it was discussed in executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennington.
Coming here, listen to you guys talk. Mark, you brought up some questions about zoning and things of that nature. I remember a couple of years ago, there was an individual that was interested in buying and living in a storefront downtown. And there was an ordinance passed, and I didn't see it into the zoning, far as zoning ordinances for downtown for the business district, that the front 60 feet had to stay, what do you want to call it, commercial. And the back half on the first floor would be, you could make an apartment or whatever. There was no Airbnbs back at the time, but that was an ordinance that was passed, and Will Crum now was the mayor then, and Rick actually was a council member then. So I don't know if Rick can remember that or if there's record of that. Oh, but that was something that they did pass it because we were at council meeting the night they passed it. So that's all I have.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I think what we're talking about though for the other property was on the street behind Rice Street, or is that what it was for, Dave?
Isn't that still business district?
I don't know if that's central business or general business.
might want to check with
Yeah.
Brent if they had the CD print, because that was all defined during that time frame.
Perfect. Anybody on council have anything else before we adjourn?
Jim, did you get that code section that I mentioned to you?
Was it for the disposal of vehicles or what, or code or something?
It defines a junk motor vehicle.
Okay,
Other sections refer back to it, but it's 4513.63. And I think it gives a value of 1,500, and so we could follow the chief's recommendation
okay.
and up those values, and so that might be
Is
something
this,
for an ordinance.
okay,
Yeah,
is this state number?
that is a state number. Yes,
Okay,
chief's
you.
got it for you if you need it.
all right.
Yeah, I can print that out for you, Jim, but I did know the revised code limit was much higher than ours. Ours is a pretty old ordinance.
Okay. Thank you, both.
So, Dave, you have anything else? Mr. Howard? Do you have anything else? Keith, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Of course. Mr. Mulligan, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Awesome. It's 9:42 and this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.